Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Vampire Counts against the Greenskins on the map Excavation Site. So in this situation I am bringing a whole bunch of Graveguard with ray weapons. These guys did have a price decrease in this past patch, and I think that's made them a lot more viable than they were before. Before they were definitely like Greatswords. They were one of those units that was kind of overpriced for what they did for their performance. And I think they're in a much better spot now, but we'll see in this matchup how they can perform. Of course, their stats are still not really any better than they ever were before. One of their big problems is that their melee attack is very bad. Although they have high weapon strength of 40 with a bonus versus infantry of 10, they've only got a base, I think, of 24 melee attack. Here is being buffed up by a Corpse Guard and a Chevron, so if we look at it, it's 24 melee attack, so their melee attack is only 34 with bonus. So that's a big struggle for them. That's one of their big weaknesses. Not the greatest charge bonus, so a decent unit overall, but previously overpriced. And I think that was 50 off. They're much better. For my lord here, I am bringing Heinrich Kemmler. I think he's not a bad choice either, at least not as bad as some people think. I believe. Lord of Undeath, I did bring Krell here, who is pretty decent, and he's actually gotten significant buffs recently to all his stats all over. He can just hack through large units, but he can also tear through enemy lords and infantry and cause terror outs and all that sort of stuff. He's an incredibly powerful combat unit. Cloak of Mist and Shadows just to keep good old Kemmler alive. Undead Resurgent. Curse of Years, and this is actually to counteract. It's a large AoE with 40 meters. I actually brought this specifically to counteract walls. I'm not going to cast it before my opponent casts wall because that would be wasted. 15 seconds on a Greenskin Lord is not that long of an advantage, but definitely the minus 26 melee attack could help. I've got Raised Dead, of course, Invocation of Nehek, and the Chaos Tomb Blade, which I think is great because you get into your enemy, start meleeing safely within a unit of Graveguard, and you're providing an AoE plus 5 melee attack to everything, plus healing everything, which I think is really solid. We also do have two White Kings who are providing additional combat support here for good old Heinrich Kemmler. These guys, of course, did get a bonus versus infantry somewhat recently, and they're honestly a respectable combat hero for a very low price at 600. Plus, they'll be providing encourage so Graveguard don't crumble too soon. Two Corpse Guards in the back, 250 apiece. They're providing a plus 5 Vigor Mortis aura to their melee attack and melee defense. In the back, Blood Knights, Dire Wolves, Dire Pack, Blood Knights. There to shut down enemy backlines, and if my opponent decides to go cav heavy, Blood Knights will dumpster any Greenskin cav in the game, even the Regiments of Renown. And then we do have the Feasters in Dusk in the very back here, hidden away, tucked away in the corner, and ready to sally out. For my opponent's build, a front line of Black Orcs, very common in this situation. They're immune to psychology, they hit like trucks. They did get a nerf this last patch, one less charge bonus, and I think one less HP per model. Not the end of the world for them, completely unnecessary in my opinion. I don't think they needed a nerf, but they were nerfed, so oh well. My opponent does have two Nasty Skulkers here protecting his flanks. Never a bad idea. These guys can, of course, snare and trap your units. A caster here, an Orc Shaman, who unfortunately, I'll say unfortunately because honestly you don't want to be doing this, has all of his spells. That's a huge investment for, in my opinion, not a great return. Usually cherry pick your spells. And then we do have Scarsnake, which is pretty cool. He's got Spite of the Bad Moon, which I don't think is all that good for Greenskins. 48 missile parry, especially not against Vampire Guns who can't shoot. And then he's got Scarsnake's Prodder, which has some sort of, it's like a shrapnel effect. It's okay. And then he's got Wah, which is of course the most important thing here. Regardless, as a combat lord, he's better than Kemmler, so he can trade well there. My opponent does immediately pop his Smoke Bomb as I charge into the Nasty Skulkers, but I actually charged into them intentionally. I knew that the Blood Knights would take some damage because Nasty Skulkers don't, especially Chevron up like this, won't immediately break, and they can do quite a bit of hurt with their high AP damage. But you know what? We roll over and we lose like 4 Blood Knights there, and we completely stomp these Nasty Skulkers. That's immediately like 600 or 700 gold off the table, probably close to 700 gold wiped off the table in a single charge there. So definitely a good move, I think, there. And then we're pushing forward, trying to pincer my opponent's backline, which is composed of some Goblin Archers as well as the Rusty Airs, or the usual sort of shooting line. Back here, you can see we've already shadowed the Nasty Skulkers. My opponent does have the Broken Tusk Mob, as well as 2 Force Goblin Spider Rider Archers. An interesting decision. I'm not entirely sure why the 2 Goblin Spider Archers, rather than the same Ogre's Mangy Marauders. But the Broken Tusk Mob is trying to kind of position itself to defend here, but we're going to get a nice little charge in there with Dire Wolves, which will prevent them from charging, and then the Blood Knights will follow up with a charge of their own, so we should be able to dumpster these guys pretty efficiently. In the meantime, you can see in the back line, we have summoned up some Skeleton Warriors to deal with the Rusty Airs and tie them down because they are the biggest problem. Normal skeleton archers will not, or normal goblin archers will not do much to the Graveguard. They've only got 1 AP. They've got their normal damage values aren't that good either, so we can kind of shrug them off. But if the rest of the arrows start hitting us, then we're going to be losing a lot of AP damage, and that's going to be a big problem. Now, my opponent is actually trying to snipe Kemmler out, which is a little annoying. He's using his goblin archers to focus Kemmler out. So I do pop a Cloak of Mist and Shadows. I'm actually going to swing around to this flank with Black Orcs, and you can see I do hit a Curse of Years, so debuffing my opponent's Black Orc line, undoing that Wa, meaning this is basically just a draw. Now, unfortunately here, I made a bit of a mistake with my charge. I got Graveguard over here, and I got 3 Graveguards stacked up over on this flank, whereas there's no Graveguard in here, so the poor White King is getting mauled. But you can see he's actually traded pretty well for that. All that, in spite of all that, he's already taken down 10 Black Orcs, which is honestly not terrible, and he's tying them down in place, which is really good. Over here, I did summon Krell, who is beating the snot out of Skarsnik. Now, granted, he is getting pounded in return, but, he's able to land some hits. Skarsnik does have pretty respectable melee defense, so Krell will struggle to hit, but nonetheless, we're doing okay. And you can see I'm sending Kemmler in. Kemmler can start attacking. He'll buff Krell's melee attack up to 60, and that's going to make this a much better affair for myself. On the periphery, surprisingly, the Broken Tusk Mob is holding out, and I don't know why, what was going on here. Despite the fact that the Blood Knights and the Direwolves were on them, maybe it's because of all these archers applying poison, but they're applying poison to their friendlies too. These guys are just not breaking. Regardless, you can see the Graveguard here are going to be able to push into the Spider Rider archers. My opponent wasn't paying attention. A White King does get on top of the Gobbo archers, and despite my opponent's best efforts, Skarsnik is taking a huge pounding from both Krell and Kemmler. And of course, Skarsnik with and he's actually being debuffed by his own archers here, so it's making Kemmler that much more effective in melee, which he normally isn't. Regardless, across the map, you can see the 2 flanks have essentially folded. In the center, where I wasn't providing too much support, the Black Orcs have won. Not even that decisively, though. This shows how much Curse of Years can do here. Debuff those Black Orcs, make them less effective against your Graveguard. In the backline, poor Skarsnik having a terrible time of things, but I've hit my healing cap on both Krell and Kemmler because my opponent has been so doggedly pursuing me with archery fire. The Crypt Ghouls that wrapped up the nasty Skulkers are now wrapping up the rusty arrows here. And in the backline, you can see the Dire Pack has caught the Force Goblin Spider Riders, which is going to be the end game for him because Dire Pack is really strong against lightly armored, heavy or large units. And these guys are an amazing pick in the you can see a foot of Gork going down here. Can't miss those. Can't miss those beauties. But Dire Pack is one of those units that is incredibly potent in basically every matchup, but really strong in the Greenskin matchup. The reason being that Greenskins don't have much armored large, almost except for obviously Ragnaroks, but they don't have much armored large, and so the Dire Pack can absolutely demolish units like Boarboy Big Guns. They can demolish units like Squig Hoppers. Even Squig Hoppers with their anti-infantry bonus will get shredded by Dire Pack, I'm pretty sure. They can shred through units like, I'm trying to think, like obviously any Wolf Riders, any units like that. If they catch them, they shred them. And even against Lords, even against say Azag even against Azag on a Wyvern or Wurtzag on a Pig, if they catch them, they'll smoke them. They'll do a lot of damage to them, so you definitely need to be wary of these guys. They're very, very strong. The only thing they don't do well against is the Ragnarok and the Broken Tusk Mob. I actually do believe they beat normal Boarboy Big Guns in a 1v1. That's how solid they are. Now, regardless for the rest of this comp, I actually do think it was very fun. Honestly, Heinrich Kemmler might not be the most competitive pick, but I do think he's viable. I think people don't bring him because it's risky, but Orcs who don't have the greatest large sniping abilities, I think he's okay. The Krell summon really pressured Skarsnik, clobbered him pretty hard, and I think Kemmler himself, providing all those AoE buffs, the constant healing, and the +5 melee attack is really solid. The 2 Vikings performed okay. 12 kills on Black Orcs when he was holding him solo is not bad. That came down to my bad micro and deployment early on, but honestly, pretty solid performance there, all things considered. And the other White King was providing great support there for the main line, so I do think they're a pretty cool unit. I do think they're pretty nifty in their own way. The Graveyard of the Great Weapons kind of crumped their way through the Black Orcs. It was a very atrocious battle, but it was atrocious in both ways, which is what really matters. The Black Orcs didn't just roll over my line instantly, so we could trade pretty well. Definitely Curse of Years, I think, is not a bad pick against Greenskins. Blood Knights, well, they're good, but they were cycle charging Black Orcs on one end, then grinding it out with Boar Boys on the other. Direwolves did well. Corpse Guards were very useful. +5 melee attack is always a nice thing, especially when you've got such low melee stats like the Graveguard. Stack a Corpse Guard on top of Kemmler, you've got +10 melee attack, so I think it's really, really solid there. For my opponent's build, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think there's a few iffy picks. I don't really like the Force Goblin Spider Riders. And as of late, I definitely would probably just merge my 2 heroes and Lords here into one. I'd probably just bring Warzag if I was trying to go competitive. Though obviously if you want to bring Scar Snake, that's fine. But Orc Shaman, I wouldn't come in with all the spells. I'd probably just not run the Orc Shaman and get Warzag in there with some spells. So that's my 2 cents. Probably swap these guys out for some better skirmishers. Mogreb's Mage Marauders if you really want to do skirmish cav. I probably wouldn't even bother, but I'd probably bring like Squig Hoppers. But if you want some skirmish cav, bring Mogreb's Mage Marauders. Just one unit of them, and consider upgrading these guys to Savage Orcs and merging these two, and using whatever remaining points you have on something else. But that's my 2 cents. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, be sure to post them down below. I'll respond as soon as I can. And as usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.